Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Milk Drunk, where we are doing part 2 of our interview with Dr. Sara, aka the Vagina Whisperer. Part 1 was so amazing that we had to make a part 2, so be sure to stay tuned. This is totally random, but I just remember this post I saw on your Instagram where you were talking about your first bowel movement after giving birth.
Oh, yeah. Doozy.
I don't think anybody could have prepared me for that. It was obviously the worst BM I've ever had in my life, but my labor was 15 hours. It was painful, beautiful but painful. And honestly, this was just as it's weird saying it was just as painful as my labor because it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but it honestly was just as painful as my labor, just not as long. I absolutely hated it. It was so bad, and I never hear people talking about it.
Oh, I talk about it all the time because it's terrible. It's like a baseball is coming out of your butt.
Literally.
And you're like, and my vagina tore. So literally, how am I supposed to do this?
Literally. Oh my God. It was so bad.
I know. And you're not, so it's interesting because to your point, like nobody talks about it yet. Every other birthing person has had that experience, whether you have a C-section, whether they have a vaginal birth, like your first poop after giving birth is hard. It's literally hard and figuratively hard.
Yes.
And so, and it's because, you've had pain medication or you're dehydrated, you've had blood loss because the tissues in that area are healing and they're vulnerable. I mean, there's so many things and nobody talks to you about how to do it. And so these are the things that when I see my moms during pregnancy, I'm like, okay, this is your checklist of what you need to have. You need to have your squatty potty or your stool under your feet. You need to make sure that you're taking stool softeners, hydrate, support the vaginal area so that you can push as you bear down and you're not going to like pop stitches or you support your tummy with a pillow. I mean, these are the things that cause women trauma and nobody teaches them how to navigate them better. And so literally, I can't tell you the number of screenshots I have of people sending me DMs and text messages of like, oh my gosh, I just took my first poop and used all your tips. And thank you so much. It made the world of difference. I'm like, yes, girl, like that is why I'm doing this.
Literally. Oh my God, it was so bad. This is such TMI. I had to just do it standing up, even because I've always used a squatty potty, but I felt like even supporting my perineum, like I had the warm compress down there and everything, but I literally felt like I was just ripping every stitch. Like I was like, I can't.
It's sad and it's awful. And then you just like, after it's done, you're like, I need to lay down. I'm exhausted.
Literally, it was the worst. My boyfriend, like he was literally on solo daddy duty. It took like 3 days for me to like get through it, but.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And you're not alone. And it's like, I'm like, take the stool softeners. Day one, take the stool softeners. And this is really where I think that I love to hear that your chiropractor and your midwife like recommended pelvic floor therapy because it's really, we need to work as a team. Like everybody needs the information and the cohesion between the care plans so that we all can best support the patient and the woman and the mom. And the families. And so I think that, the goal is really like, how can we get labor and delivery rooms to get you this information? How can we get, physicians and midwives to like tell you how to do this? How can we get a proactive referral to pelvic health PT during pregnancy and postpartum? So, I think we all want what's best for the patient. And I think that we are inching closer and closer to how do we, best support people in the process. And I honestly think the people who are doing that work are moms like you. It's, it's women who are saying like, hey, we need this care, and they're going to their different providers to get the resources because it's, again, we're just so segmented. So I love that these conversations are happening.
Yeah, same. I am pivoting a bit here, but I always am interested to know who, people have in their village when it comes to raising their children. Because it really is true. It's such a cliche saying, but it does take a village to raise children. So first of all, how old are your sons?
My kids are 7 and 9, and I'm 41.
Okay, cool. So did you have any help during those early days in the beginning, or was it just you and your husband?
It was just me. My husband travels
Oh,
for work. So for both of
oh,
our, I know. So for both of our sons, he was back on the road 2 weeks after I gave birth.
wow.
And
Oh my
I
gosh.
know. And his company only gave 2 weeks of paternity leave at the time. And that was new. Like literally the month before I gave birth to my first son, it was 1 week. And so we're like, yay, now we get 2 weeks. And looking back, I don't know how I did that. I mean,
Yeah.
it was really hard. And I will say that I had family come visit. My mom came. My mother-in-law was living close to Dallas where we were, so she would drop by. But I mean, day in and day out, it's you. You are the person
Mm-hmm.
who is caring for that baby. But I have always had this incredible group of mom friends. And
Mm.
it was one of the things I didn't realize that once you kind of cross over into being a parent or a mom, you do have this village. And it's other moms who are like, we got you. They are saying like, hey, you got to get out of the house. Let's go for a walk. Or like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
taking my kids here. I'll help you bring your kid. Or they're dropping food on your porch. Or I remember I was talking to like a new mom friend in Dallas. My mom friends in Dallas were like my OG mom friends, like who we navigate like the first 2 years of babies together. And they will
Mm-hmm.
always be like my people. And I was telling her my challenges breastfeeding, and she's like, "Oh, I have a nipple shield, a nipple shield you can use. Like it's been on my nipple, but like you can use it. You know,
Yeah.
like these are my people." And then I moved to New Orleans, which is where my family's from, and we
Mm.
do have a really incredible village here. I don't have like consistent childcare for my kids with my parents, but if I have my sisters both have kids, and we are constantly texting. And I have a great group of mom friends here that we are, my NOLA mom gals, where we're like, whose kid has this, and like what do we do for this, and just
Mm-hmm.
you just feel like you're less alone in that process. It's still you, but having people are like, hey girl, we got you. Like if you fall, like we're there, and if you need help with the kids, like we got it. And just knowing that support is available carries you through really hard times. And even the Instagram community, like the
Mm.
the Vagina Whisperer community, like navigating hard things and sharing about it. It's so many women, when I share something really vulnerable or authentic, they're like, I feel that. And it just really does help you feel more connected and less alone. So just from all of these avenues, I feel incredible support.
Mm-hmm.
And that everybody in this mom world is kind of like wrapping you up, because this shit is hard.
It is. I don't know how you managed when the second one got here, especially that I can't imagine two under
It was,
two. What?
I can't either. I mean, I look back and that's why we stopped. That's why we stopped, because we're like, that's enough. I think
Yeah.
we're at capacity, and that's another
Mm-hmm.
thing is that, I see moms who have 3 kids and 4 kids, and I wish I would have had more kids because I love a big family, but I also knew like, hey, physically I'm at capacity and my marriage is at capacity. Like,
Yeah.
and we both
Mm-hmm.
work. So it was just one of those things where we kind of knew like, hey, this would have been dreamy, but we also know that like we are at our threshold of what we can handle. And
Mm-hmm.
I think people have a hard time accepting that. I had a hard time, but I love my kids. I love my family. I feel really blessed to have both of them. But we have to make hard choices, and our choice was like, I think we are where we need to be, and
Yeah.
we don't need any more. We shouldn't have any more kids.
Yeah. We always go back and forth if we want a second because we were both raised as only children. So we're fine with just
Right.
having an only
You're like, I grew
child.
up fine.
Right.
Why do they need another one? And
Right.
it's such a personal choice, and that's
Yeah.
great and beautiful. And I'm one of 4. And so
Mm-hmm.
I love the energy of having more people around, and having my kids have more people in the world with them. But I think that there's no like right answer,
Yeah.
it's just, and raising a kid takes a lot of work and a lot of energy. And so yeah, everybody kind of makes the decisions that are right for them. But I do tell people like, wait till 1 year. Like I didn't,
Oh, for sure.
the whole
Yeah.
first year, you're like, I can't do this anymore. So I'm like, just wait till 1 year, and then then rethink about it,
Mm-hmm.
So you're not
Yeah.
quite there yet.
How much maternity leave did you take for yourself?
So for my first son, I actually took 13 weeks. The majority of it was unpaid. I saved up
Mm-hmm.
all of my vacation time, because that's unfortunately like what we had to do. There was no like actual maternity leave. And then I got a little bit of coverage from short-term disability. So I got 13 weeks. And then my second one, I actually didn't go back to work for an entire year.
Oh, wow.
And the reason was I went on maternity leave, but our lease ran out and my husband was traveling and we had to move in with my in-laws. And all this was like with two babies. Like I left the hospital with my second kiddo and I went straight to live with my in-laws for 3 months because our lease had just run out and I had my kid early. And so we just, it was just wild. And so ultimately that's why we moved to New Orleans, which is where my family is and where my husband was working. And so we had a health issue with my son that first year where I couldn't return to work because I needed to stay home with him. And then it took me a year to get back to work. But during that time is when I started the Vagina Whisperer. It's when I started posting on Instagram and doing online sessions and doing online workouts. And so it created this, it was this kind of very weird, unexpected pivot that I've never not worked, but it opened up this space to a door to something I could have never imagined. And it's kind of just been following that path ever since.
I mean, I hate this saying in the moment when you're in the thick of it, but everything does happen for a reason. And it brought you to this whole new world, you know, and you reach so many people through the Vagina Whispers. So that's really cool.
It is really cool. And I really love it. I mean, I think that I love, and people like, how did you get into this? And it's like, it's the patience. I mean, I think that you can't hear the stories that I've heard for the past 17 years and not think like, there has got to be a better way. Like we have got to do a better job. And I just am super passionate about, you know, one, getting us more comfortable with our bodies. I mean, like our pelvic floor is like another part of our body. It's like an elbow, you know, it's just a body part, you know? And so that's never been a big deal to work with it as a medical provider. I think that, you know, people are feeling ashamed and embarrassed and not getting the support that they need, but it affects our quality of life. It affects our ability to work and exercise and be intimate. And we deserve to, again, live full, happy lives. Like there's enough things on our plate that I don't want pelvic floor problems to be part of them. So I love this work. I feel incredibly blessed and lucky to have picked this path.
Yeah.
And I'm just, I hope that, again, we just keep saving vaginas to make the world a better place.
Right. That's your tagline. Just save vagina, one vagina at a time.
One vagina at a time.
If you had it your way, like what would be the minimum amount of time for maternity and paternity, family leave in general?
If I had it my way, it would, I mean, if I look at other countries where outcomes are better, it would be 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if in the dream world, it would be a year, which I know is a big ask. I would say at a minimum, it's 6 months. Like, I feel like at 3 months, we're like, sometimes our vaginas have just stopped bleeding at 6 or 8 weeks. And like, we're sending people back to work, you know, I mean, we're just learning how to feed. We're literally getting out of bed and returning. We're not even sleeping yet. So 6 months minimum, 12 months dreamy.
Yeah, that's literally the same for me as well. 6 months is when I felt comfortable again. So I totally agree. Yeah. At what point did you teach your kids the proper terminology for body parts and stuff? Because you reference your vulva costume to them and stuff. So I wonder, like, when did you start incorporating that with them?
From the start.
I mean,
it was we don't do nicknames for our body parts. It is like, this is your penis. Like, so I'm like, I mean, the amount of times that I have to say penis in my house with 2 young boys is more than I could have meant. It's literally yesterday. I was like, please don't wrap that rubber band around your penis. Like, please put your penis away at the dinner table. I mean, it's unbelievable, the life that I live here. But I have always used the proper terms, and it's something that I use day in and day out. And even they come home and they have these kind of, they're like, my nuts and I'm like, okay, can we just, they're called testicles. He's like, Mom, nobody calls them testicles. I'm like, can we compromise and just call them balls? I'm like, you're calling nuts. I'm like, you don't call like your ears corns. Like, let's just use the right terms. And for my body, we're kind of a very open household. I think I'm just so comfortable because I see bodies all day. And so, we talk about them and we don't make them something to be ashamed of or feel weird about. And it's just a very normal part of talking about our bodies like we do anything else. So I started from the very beginning. And, you know, I think that we have to be comfortable with our bodies and using these terms in order to teach our kids to be comfortable with their bodies and talking about these terms. So I think it really starts with us. I don't want to call my vagina or vulva a cookie or a cha-cha or a chi-chi. Like I just never, that was not my culture growing up, but it's not the culture that I create for my kids either. And I also, being boys, like I want them to respect a woman's body. I want them to be familiar with it. I want them to understand like what a period is. And, you know, when you use these different menstrual hygiene products or why girls pee differently than boys. And they're just, I think if we talk about our bodies for what they are and not in just constantly sexual, playful ways, it just normalizes when we have to have conversations about medical things as well.
For sure. And it'll just help destigmatize it in the future. So
totally.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's what I plan on doing as well. But I'm always I want people to hear it from a medical professional.
Do you have a boy or a girl?
I have a girl.
Yeah. So, and it's one of those things that, you know, everybody's different too. Like this is my comfort level. And so I respect when people's is different. For me, this is what works for my family. And so I think that the tides are shifting. And there's also a lot of research to show, like, if we teach people about like the names of their body parts when they need to talk about them, they know how to talk about them.
Right.
It's not something secret or private or weird or icky. It's just a body part. And so I think that we can really change the tides of how we approach this part of our body with just conversation and language.
I agree. I want to circle back really quick to your feeding journey. And you apparently took a stance on formula feeding and were very vocal in talking about it on your page, and were cyberbullied because of it. Which is crazy. Like, what were some of the things that people were saying, and how did you handle that?
I was very vocal about like, hey, there are better products out there for formula now. And this was one of them, a brand that I was working with. And there were people who kind of came out of everywhere, the cyber woodwork, to say like, how dare you as a medical professional recommend formula. There's a study, there's a paper called The Lancet that talks about how medical professionals shouldn't recommend a specific formula type for women or for families. And just like that, me saying that formula is okay is wrong, because breast is best and breast milk is best, and we should be only supporting that. And I was completely shocked. You know, I work with dozens and dozens of women who come into my office postpartum and are struggling with feeding. I mean, to the point of having mental health challenges, sleep challenges, physical challenges. And I'm like, you have to do what works for you. So everybody can tell you, even myself, like what we think the best thing is, but you have to make the choices that are right for you and lean into what feels right for your body and your family. And that's really like these early stages of motherhood are where we really start to learn like, oh, this is a muscle I have to flex, because you're going to be doing this for the rest of your life and the rest of your child's, upbringing. And I didn't know that they call it lactivist, like this whole lactivist movement was out there. And a couple things really stand out to me. It was total cyberbullying. I was super disappointed because I think that it felt really immature. It felt like disheartening that adults were treating other adults this way, that we're all supposed to be caring for families. And this was how you treated another health professional, another woman, another, medical provider who's trying to support people. I'm like, if you don't like it, just like move past it, but don't troll me,
Yeah.
So that was the first thing. The second thing is I doubled down and I was like, you know what? I put down like $1,000, and I was like, for every person who needs it, I'm going to give you $50, and you can either go buy formula or you can buy breastfeeding supplies, or you can do whatever you want, because everybody deserves options.
Yeah.
And I think that for me to say like, oh, you shouldn't do this, I'm like, that's not for me to say. I think that every person has to make the best decisions for them, and we shouldn't shame them. And that paper that was referenced was put out in the 70s. And it was for the entire world. It's put up at the World Health Organization. So it was taking into account different Asian and African countries where they were not, supporting lactation for mothers. And it was formula feeding. And so it was it was totally taken out of context.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of privilege that goes along with assuming that everybody has access to breast milk, to donor milk, to breast milk supplies. And that's just not the case. Yeah. There are people who are having to go back to work within weeks of giving birth, within days, and they don't have the capacity to pump or feed. And so it was just shaming everybody who chose a different way. And I just don't think that that's the kind of support that moms and families need. And I completely stand by that there are better formulas out there, that even if you choose any formula, like, you have to do what is best for you and your family. And but it was a hard time. It was one of those times on social media that was like, okay, this is what comes with being a public figure in this territory. Yeah. And it was when I made the very firm decision that my kids will not be on social media, because it was hard for me to navigate as an adult versus let alone a kid who is still developing and really, vulnerable to societal pressures. But yeah, I stand by it. And I'm super fortunate that there are new formula brands that are coming out that want to do right by families and parents. And I think that we all deserve options. And that's exactly what, these formulas do, is give us options.
I'll never understand how people can be so mean online. I've never felt compelled to leave a mean comment.
They are so mean. And it's so, people are mean. And it's really easy to, I think, fire off these comments and just tell people why we think that they're bad. And so you do have to have, I'm sure experience this, like, you have to have thick skin. Yeah. It definitely affects us. I can't say it doesn't affect me. I lost sleep over that. I lost sleep. I stayed up for nights. I actually fainted that week because I was so stressed out. I know I didn't even tell anybody that, because that's how distraught I was about it. Yeah. It's pretty damaging, and words matter. And I just hope that we get to a place where we are more thoughtful about how we respond to someone who sees things differently.
I agree. I feel like when it comes to parenthood, people want mothers especially to suffer. I feel like it's this undertone of being a mom, you have to suffer through it and just sacrifice everything for your children. And I know, if you're a parent who gives a damn about your kid, you are willing to do that, but it doesn't have to be that way.
It's funny because I'm like, my kids eat goldfish off the ground, what they were fed in that first. And my son has eczema, asthma. One of them has a heart challenge. These things are going to happen, and there are some benefits. For some people who opt to give their kids only breast milk only. But I'm like, I did all of that, and one of my sons has broken his leg twice, and he's got allergies, and we're not gonna. All of that pressure doesn't necessarily benefit us in the long run. And I remember one time I left my kids with my mom when one of them was a baby, and I left a bunch of breast milk for her. And I came back and she was like, "Oh, here, you've got one extra bag of breast milk." She's like, "Oh, you were almost out." So I just gave him some formula. I had some in the pantry, and I was like, "He's never had formula." She goes, "Well, he has now. So, and if you're worried about it, you got other problems going on. So don't even sweat it. He's fine." And I was like, he is fine. It's he's fine. And then he's all in the irony. I was like, well, you could have used the breast milk because now I've got leftover. Yeah. But in her mind, but it was also my mom's philosophy was what's the big deal? And I am what is the big deal? Right. So it's these things that feel really big while we're in them. But sometimes when you just pull back and you're like, you know what, in the big scheme of things, it's fine. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that I had that little lesson, because again, my kids eat crap these days. So it's we do the best we can.
Yeah. When it comes to co-parenting, I want to know if you have any advice. I think you have a pretty unique situation with your husband having to travel. Fairly similar to my situation. My boyfriend, he can have to go on a job at the drop of a dime for 3 weeks or more. So do you have any philosophies on how you co-parent? Is it divide and conquer? Just whatever happens, happens. Whoever can take care of something, take care of it.
All of the above. Yeah. I think that, again, that journey has evolved and changed as our kids have gotten older. I think that we're definitely in a space of divide and conquer with 2 kids with a lot of obligations where, this morning, one of my kids had something at school. My husband's like, I have an early meeting. I'm like, okay, I'll go to that. Tomorrow I'm with patients all day. And he's like, okay, I'll go to this thing. In May, by the way, is May is the busiest month for school age parents who have school age kids because it's like something every day. So it's a lot of divide and conquer. The other thing is we do try to keep a lot of space in our schedules. Like on the weekends, we don't overschedule us because we do want time as a family. Like sometimes it's just like we are passing ships, all week long, and we want time to be together. And sometimes that means not being with other families or not doing other social things. So we really try to have time as a family. The nights we're home, we eat dinner together every night. It's how I grew up.
Yeah.
We don't, so we don't sit at the counter. We don't watch TV while we eat. It's like, I really am very focused on that unit as much as possible to just maintain some connection and consistency. But my husband and I have had this one kind of guideline that has helped us as we've navigated different seasons of parenting. And it's whoever has the more kind of conservative, safe opinion on something is what we go with. So, when we were living in Dallas, he was like, oh, these grandparents of my friend can watch our kids so we can go to this wedding. And I was like, I don't know. I don't feel super comfortable with that. Like, them, but I don't know them. And so we lean towards the parent who has the more conservative view, or like, maybe I wanted my kids to, I'm like, oh, I want my kids to play tackle football and I don't care. And which I don't. And he's like, oh, well, I don't feel really safe with that. It doesn't, the research isn't great for this or whatever. So I'm like, we lean towards whichever parent has like the safest, more conservative view, because I'm not going to change his opinion and he's not going to change mine. But we have just had a rule of like, whoever has that safer, more conservative view is the one that we yield to, because I don't want something to happen where I'm like, okay, punt the kid out the door. We go do this and something happens. And then there's a lot of guilt there. So we just kind of lean towards that for decision making. And it's helped us a ton.
Yeah.
It's helped us a ton. And we have, figured out like the divide and conquer, like one person makes breakfast, one person makes the school lunches, one person does pickup, one person does drop off. So it minimizes the decision making, because as you know, parents are constantly making decisions. So but I mean, we still have communication challenges, and I still feel like I carry the majority of the load of parenting and planning and all the things, so there's always imbalances. I think we just, our goal is to just at least feel like we are trying to do as much as a team as possible.
Yeah, I really love that. I love the conservative view decision. That's something I'd consider implementing. That's cool.
Yeah, it's one of those things where he was like, why don't we consider a home birth, And I was like, I'm totally down with an unmedicated birth, but I do want to be in a hospital, And so it was like, okay, that's what we went with. So we kind of just always, it helps us just kind of like nail down that decision. But I was like, but I do want a doula. And he's like, well, I don't want to spend the money. I was like, well, we're doing it, So it's kind of like whoever has that more like, it's helped us, it doesn't mean that all the problems are solved, but it does help us lean towards like, respecting the other person's opinion.
Totally.
Without kind of just like overshadowing them or just trying to like, roll them over. So it's helped.
Okay, so before we close out, we always ask if you have any parenting hacks for us. You gave us a lot of great info, but just anything off the top of your head at any stage. Do you have any parenting hack you'd like to share?
Oh my goodness, they vary for every stage.
Yeah.
And none of them are hacks. I mean, they're all things that take a little bit of work. But what I would say is, it's so cliche, but I'm like, take the help if people offer it. I have a really hard time accepting help from people. When my husband traveled a couple weekends ago, he was out for a weekend. I called a friend. I was like, hey, I have a lot going on with this one kid. Could my son come sleep at your house for a night? And so I don't have to bring both of them. And just like getting help when I needed. I mean, it took me 2 days to build up the courage to ask my friend, who's a close friend. And but really like using the help when it's available, asking for it if you need it, taking it if it's offered, because we can't do this alone. We can, but it's really hard. Even with support, it's hard. So don't feel guilty or bad about that if you can help it. I obviously recommend all folks go to see a pelvic floor therapist.
Yes,
because,
obviously.
I read all these things about like, you need to exercise for your mental health. And then you need to like be intimate with your partner to maintain connection. I'm like, if you're peeing your pants or you're pain with sex, like those things aren't going to happen. So it's like we kind of need to think a little bit deeper about like the implications of pelvic health issues and how that affects our function. So I'm a huge fan of that. And then for me, I mean, it's like, I think it's okay to slow down. I mean, I want this time with my kids. I am a very busy person. I work a lot, but I also I want to be with them, you know? And so I don't send them away to sleepaway camp. I don't, it's like, I want that time with them. And I do feel like I miss out on a lot of things, but I also don't want to miss out on this. And I think that everybody's different, so this is what works for me and my family. Everybody's going to find their way. I just think that the paths look different. And so if we can just not place judgment on people for having a different path, I think that's pretty important.
Yeah. Well, that definitely helps me because I want to say no all too often when people offer help, but I've just become more comfortable saying yes. So yeah, I definitely relate to that.
Good. But, and we need that. And people want to help. Like I do want to help my friends when I offer it. So take it. And then it's also like you can say no when people want to, they invite you to do stuff and you don't want to go. And I tell them, I'm like, okay, I'm going to say no, but invite me next time.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, don't take me off the text chain, but just like, don't count me in for this one,
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sara. I totally appreciate you coming on the podcast this week. You were a phenomenal guest. Like I'm always interested to see, where's this conversation going to go? But you gave us a lot of great insight into pelvic floor therapy and just parenthood in general, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want you to plug everything. You're writing a book, apparently, so please tell us all about that too and where we can find you.
My website is thevaginawhisperer.com, where I have online pelvic floor and core workouts for all stages: pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, painful sex, strengthening, just really, really trying to make pelvic health education and exercise more accessible for people, affordable for people, so that everybody can get this, really important information and these workout routines. And they're just 10 minutes. Again, I made these workouts so that like they fit into my crazy busy life and like my mom could do them. So, and then I am writing a book. It's called Floored, a complete guide to women's pelvic floor health for every age and stage. It won't be out until 2025, but I am very hard at work writing it right now. And I have an amazing editor and publishing team and agent who were supporting me in that. And they reached out to me, they were like, hey, there are no pelvic health books out there right now. And we really feel like this is important for people to have. And we think you do a great job at writing it. It has been one of the biggest professional challenges to write it. But I'm just so excited to share it with people, to make this mainstream healthcare. And, we talk about, there's like hundreds of books on dieting and everything. And I'm like, what about this other part of our body that's so important? So I'm just really excited for that to come out. So stay tuned. I'll let everybody know when it's released.
Congratulations on that. That's so exciting. I cannot wait. Thank you. Yeah, and I love Floored. Perfect title.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Sara. It was such a pleasure. And be sure you check out her new book, Floored, which is coming out sometime next year. And follow her so you can stay up to date on everything pelvic floor therapy and her new book. And please tell us where to find you.
You can find me on Instagram at the Vagina Whisperer, the.vagina.whisperer, and on TikTok at the Vag Whisperer.
Awesome. Thank you again. And that is another episode of Milk Drunk.